Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our AP Psychology Flipped Classroom. Today, we are going to go over a very brief history of psychology, then and now. And this pretty much goes along with what you guys did for your reading over the weekend, which is a prologue. It's a condensed version of that and a couple of extra things added in. So, first things first, psychology is the stepchild of philosophy and physiology. Philosophy is like thinking about the human condition and wondering about, different ethical questions. And then we have physiology, which is the like physical body side of things. So it's a combination of thinking about and the human mind and the human capacity and the human body as a physical thing. This is Wilhelm Wundt. He is the father of psychology, right? He is German, so when you say his name, you have to say it Wilhelm Wundt, right? That's who he is. And he opened up the very first psychology laboratory ever in Germany, okay, in 1879. And he did the very first experiment. He wanted to figure out the smallest piece of the human mind. So what he wanted to do was be able to break down the human mind into the tiniest, littlest compartment and see at the base of it what it broke down to. Eventually, psychology, though, did move from Germany right on over to America, or a lot of Americans traveled to Germany to study with Wilhelm Wundt, and then, of course, in true American style, they moved right back to America, brought it all home, and opened up our own research facilities here. The gentleman you see there, Stanley Hall, he is the very first American to open up a research facility in the United States, okay? And he actually established what's now called the APA, the American Psychological Association. It's an organization that if you're a psychologist or a psychology student or a psychology teacher like moi, you are in this organization. You get newsletters for them. They research different things, and it's a place where all psychology people can meet together, okay? And if you see over here on this little chart, it goes through how many members they've had from when they started till now. All right, so in the beginning, there was kind of two basic schools of psychology. There was structuralism and functionalism. Structuralism was founded by a guy named Edward Titchener, and basically he focused on the structure of the mind. So he wanted to know about all the specific parts of the mind and how all of that worked together, kind of like all the parts of a car, how they all go together. On the opposite side of the street was William James, and he believed in functionalism. He didn't really care about all the different pieces. He wanted to know about what was the function of the car as the whole. So how did the car work and help us get through our day? How did it help us survive and adapt, right? So it's like the pieces of the mind or the purpose of the mind. Two very different ways of looking at the mind. Women, right? You see a lot of old white guys in the beginning of psychology, okay? Women were not really allowed into psychology in the beginning, all right? You have three women that may show up on the AP test that you should probably know. Mary Calkins, first person that you got to know, first female president of the APA. Okay, Margaret Washburn, she had the very first PhD in psychology, and she was the second president. And then you have Lita Hollingsworth, and she came up with the term gifted, and she's very influential in her work in gender differences. Those three women are kind of like the women that you might hear about on the AP test in terms of the history of psychology. All right, so what is psychology today, right? It started all the way back with Aristotle, questioning about the mind. Are we born this way? Do the environment, right? All the way through today. Today, we define psychology as the science of behavior and mental processes. So the way that we act, think, feel, behave, and understand the world around us. Basically, psychology is the study of everything in life. Anything that a human could do, psychology, because it's the way you act or the way you think. So it covers everything. So everything is psychology. Psychology is life. All right, so if you are a psychologist today, what does one look like? Maybe you think of this lovely picture, right? Tell me how you feel, right? And he's writing down little notes. Now, here's the deal. This is very stereotypical, right? It's not really what a therapist or a psychologist looks like. Psychologists are not just therapists who sit in an office. And even if you are a therapist, the whole laying down on the couch thing doesn't really happen. But not all psychologists are therapists. There's tons of things you can do with a psychology degree besides being a therapist. So, psychology is the second most popular major in the United States. For a reason, because it's awesome. And here are top most popular psychology jobs for psych majors. Take a look, pause this if you want to, see the different jobs and how much they get paid. All right, so if you're going to be a psychology major, you got to have a couple of different options in terms of what kind of degree you're going to get. First off, bachelor's degree. A lot of different job opportunities, 4 years of college, that's about it. If you want to get your master's degree, this is additional 2 years. So what Ms. Schaefer's working on right now, except my master's degree is going to be in counseling instead of psychology. Very similar, except my focus is on counseling. It's on the therapy side. You can get your master's in counseling or a master's in psychology and be a researcher or do testing and give kids tests to see if they have disorders or to test them on certain like speech things or whatever, right? So not all psychology masters are therapists. A counseling master's like I'm getting focuses on therapy. The next degree you can get is a doctoral degree. So this is another 5 to 7 years. Generally, it's a PhD or a PsyD, and you're going to work in either a clinical setting, so you're going to work in a hospital seeing patients, or you're going to work with research, okay? Or you can get a medical degree, which is your MD, and this is where you prescribe medicine. An MD gives you a psychiatrist, right? So a PhD, you're a psychologist. An MD, you're a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists can give out meds like Prozac, those kinds of things. Psychologists really can't. All right, so here's what the different fields that psychologists do. You learned a little bit about this, in the activity with the different, you had to match the different jobs, all across the board. So you have clinical psychologists who work, as therapists kind of in the mental health world, looking at disorders and those kinds of things. You have community counselors, you have developmental who work with little kids, educational, they study like the different way kids' minds think and different educational initiatives. Health psychologists, forensic, they do the law stuff. IO psychologists, those are the business guys, they go into offices and they tell businesses how to run their offices better. There's all across the board, all different kinds of things you can do. There's a sports psychologist. There's a human factors psychologist, and they study how machines can be better made for humans. So there's all across the board. You don't have to be a therapist. Here's the percentage of what kind of people work in each job. Obviously, clinical has the largest job. Most people work in clinical setting, but you don't have to work in a clinical setting. There's many other options. So, okay, there's two basic types of psychologists. There's a basic researcher. A researcher is someone who sits in a lab, comes up with ideas, but doesn't actually use them in the real world. All they do is just increase our knowledge about humans. Okay, they study humans and they increase the knowledge base. Then they send that research to an applied psychologist who then uses that new knowledge we have and tries to actually make it work in our world. So how can we use this new knowledge about the way that kids think to make better toys for kids, right? They use it in a practical real world way. Okay, so a cognitive psychologist might think about how humans problem solve. So they did this research and they figured out humans problem solve by A, B, and C. They send that research to an industrial organizational IO psychologist, and then they tell their employees, okay, guess what? People think like A, B, and C, so you should use A to boost morale and B and C to improve productivity, and then you'll have better employees. So they actually apply it in the real world. All right, that's all for now, AP Psychos. And remember, psychology is flippin' awesome.